You are listening to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast, where it's all about education, support, and coaching for adults with ADHD. I'm your host, Zena, a late diagnosed ADHDer, here to help you unpack the challenges, frustrations, and the positive side of living with ADHD. With my no BS approach, I'll help you to better understand your unique ADHD brain and how you can work with it to feel better, increase your self-confidence, improve your relationships, and ultimately achieve your goals. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to Navigating Adult ADHD. We got episode number 89 today. OMG. I was like, you're telling me I have consistently recorded a podcast episode 89 weeks in a row? Wow, that's just wild. I love it. Now, if you are a newly diagnosed ADHDer, an adult with ADHD, newly diagnosed, my friend, this is for you. This episode is exactly for you. Now, before we dive in, I just wanted to ask if you are enjoying the podcast, if you're loving it, if you're getting value, if you could rate and review it. Hopefully it's a 5 stars. I really hope so. But if you could do that, it will help other adults with ADHD to find us. And if you know somebody, you could even send it to them. And also, you give me a huge dopamine boost. I love reading your reviews and seeing what you guys have to say about the podcast. So I'd be so grateful. Now, today we're talking about a beginner's guide to adult ADHD. And we're going to go through a whole bunch of things in an order that I think makes sense, starting with what is ADHD? We're going to literally start from the top, my friend. And before we do that, I wanted to share just a little bit about my own journey as it relates to ADHD. So I was diagnosed at age 36, so a few years ago now, and that was when everything finally made sense. I had known my whole life that I was different. I'd always felt like there was something wrong with me, like I just couldn't do things as easily as everybody else. I'd always assumed maybe I was just lazy, or I didn't have what it takes, or I just needed to try harder, right? I literally thought that I must be stupid for quite a while because I could never formulate my words and my sentences in the ways in which other people could, or I just couldn't connect the dots like they could. But then I was able to do other things really well that they couldn't do, right? Or I could see things and observe things and know things that other people couldn't, and I couldn't always explain it. Like, I just knew something was different about me and I could never put my finger on it. And getting the diagnosis was so validating. I was like, oh my God, of course, it made so much sense. Now, prior to that, because I've been coaching now for about 9 years, I think, I had been working with so many neurodiverse people. So typically it was people who had ADHD, some people had autism, and a lot of people also with dyslexia. And it was so interesting to me that I could relate so much, and I had been through so many of their experiences and navigated, how to work with a lot of these things. And so it was kind of like the universe was like, hey, hello, you've got ADHD. Hi. And then 2 of my closest friends were diagnosed, and I was like, okay, I think that's me. So I was self-diagnosed for a good year before I went, I might go and get diagnosed and try medication. And I've got to say, medication has been incredible for me. Okay. So that's a little bit of my backstory. I was not diagnosed till I was 36. However, I was misdiagnosed, which is very common for especially women, but adults in general. I was misdiagnosed with anxiety, and I did struggle with an eating disorder, which again is quite common. And at no time did anyone ever mention to me that I could potentially have ADHD or screen me for it when I was going through different systems, right? Funny story, because here we go, ADHD side tangent, side quest. I was in a psychiatrist's office one day, and this is back when I was at I think around age 18-ish, and I was struggling with my eating disorder, and I was kind of coming towards the end of it then. And when I was in the office of the psychiatrist, he was having a conversation with me with his white clip, his clipboard and his white bits of paper and all of that. This alarm starts going off, in this office, and somebody comes into the room, knocks on the door, comes into the room and whispers something to him, and he gets all frantic. And he says to me, "Oh, somebody has escaped the mental ward." These were his words. "Somebody has escaped the mental ward and they're running around with a knife. So you should probably leave now." That's what he said to me. And he hustled me out the back door and just sent me on my way. That was the last appointment I had. So wild. Anyway, all right, that's not what you're here for, but a little side quest. My friend, let's talk about ADHD and understanding ADHD. So first of all, what is it? Okay. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition. Now, this means it impacts our nervous system, meaning our brain and the way it communicates with our body. Okay, so effectively our brain and our body. So our nervous system is wired differently, and therefore it works differently in comparison to our neurotypical friends, our friends without ADHD. Okay, now the term attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a little bit misleading and also quite negative. Okay, it does imply that we have a deficit of attention. We don't have enough, right? That's not true. We actually have plenty of attention. It's our ability to pay attention to one thing that works quite differently to our neurotypical friends, okay? Our attention is more scattered, okay? So there's a Māori word here in New Zealand for ADHD, and it is aro reratini, and that means attention goes to many things. That's actually a much more accurate description for living with ADHD, because our attention does go to many different things. And we know when we get into what's called hyperfocus and we focus on one thing that we're very passionate about or interested in, we can literally lose track of time and get, 5 days worth of work done in 5 hours, right? Or become an expert on a topic in just a day when we're in hyperfocus and we have all of our attention in one place. Okay? So let's go through the different types of ADHD. So there are technically 3 types of ADHD, and when you are diagnosed, your psychiatrist or medical professional may tell you which category you're in. Sometimes they don't, and that's okay. It's not like you necessarily need to know. You will likely identify more so with one or the other, okay? So the 3 types are inattentive. So that's number 1. The second one is hyperactive impulsive. And then the third one is a combination of both, all right? So first of all, let's go through the symptoms of inattentive. Now, commonly this is more geared towards girls and women. However, of course, males can be in this category too. So symptoms of inattentive include daydreaming and being easily distracted. So perhaps you had those report cards like I did that said, away with the fairies and would do well if she paid attention, right? It also includes missing important details or making careless mistakes, getting bored real easily, hello, having a hard time staying focused, yes, trouble getting organized. And another one being difficulty with instructions when given them, perhaps verbal instructions, or you may not pay attention when somebody is speaking to you, okay? Or it could look like you're not paying attention. Avoiding tasks that require a lot of focus. A symptom is losing track of things, forgetful in day-to-day activities, and having trouble following instructions and often shifting from task to task without finishing things. Okay, so those are some of the common symptoms of the inattentive type of ADHD. Now, let's go look at the symptoms of the hyperactive impulsive type. So when we think of that, it's often what a lot of people picture when they talk about ADHD, which is the little boy at school can't sit still, getting in trouble, disrupting everybody, right? The hyperactive impulsive type of ADHD is more visible outwardly. Okay, so symptoms include fidgeting and not being able to sit still and squirming around. Maybe it's for me, it's I'm always playing with the jewelry on my hands, the rings on my hands, or I literally just have fidget items in my bags all the time now, and I'll get one out. But it could be that you're shaking your leg or twirling your hair, right? Constantly doing something like that. Non-stop talking. That one. Trouble focusing on quiet tasks such as reading. It can also be like running from place to place or skipping from one thing to another, like, ping-ponging around, kind of acting like you're being driven by a motor, like you've got all this energy you've got to get out, okay? Constantly leaving your seat and getting up to move around when you're meant to be sitting still. So if you've ever had coaching sessions with me, or if you've ever seen me like on a training or something, you will see that I'm constantly moving around in my seat. Like I'm always repositioning myself. I can't just like sit still. And that might be something you experience too. Being impatient, blurting out comments or answers at times when you shouldn't, right? Or talking over people, interrupting people, right? Interrupting people when they're talking or speaking like when you're not meant to be talking. And trouble like waiting for your turn or like having to stand in a line, like anytime you got to be patient, difficulty with that, right? Those are some of the common symptoms of the hyperactive impulsive type, okay? Then again, we've got our third type, which is the combined type, which includes both of those. And that was me. That's what category I was actually given when I was diagnosed, right? So in terms of common symptoms, I think we kind of covered quite a few of them in there, but just to talk through what you might notice a little more in your day-to-day life, it could be that you have real difficulty focusing on something, finishing things, or getting started even. Could be that you're super impulsive. So maybe you're like buying lots of things online, or like you say yes to something only to be like, oh shit, I wish I hadn't signed up to that, right? Like the energy I've got today does not match the energy I had when I said yes to that thing. Anybody relate? Yes. Emotional dysregulation is another really big symptom of ADHD. And I think, in my opinion, it's one of the hardest ones. So that could be, you get really explosive. You struggle to manage your emotions. You get easily frustrated. You might get really, really irritable at a certain time of day. It could be that, when somebody's giving you feedback, you shut down, right? And you just really go into your shell. You struggle to have a difficult conversation with somebody without either like yelling or like having to kind of run away, right? Like emotional dysregulation impacts our relationships, our work, all sorts of things. And that's quite a difficult one. Then we've got time blindness. So that could be that you're always running late, or if you're more of the hypervigilant type like me, it could be that you're always early because you're like, opposite end of the scale, but you're really so paranoid about being late. But often with time blindness, a lot of ADHDers do find themselves like running late, or a common one might be that you forget to allow travel time. So you think, oh yeah, I've, finished work at 5:00. So yeah, I'll be at your place at 5 for, that party. And it's like, no, actually, I forgot to allow like 5 minutes to walk to my car, 15 minutes to drive there, another 10 minutes to get a park. Oh, hang on, I need another 30 minutes, right? Time blindness can also lead into, along with other things, achieving long-term goals. So that's one thing that a lot of adults with ADHD have difficulty with, is achieving longer-term goals that require a lot of different things from our brain, like planning, prioritizing, showing up when we don't feel like it, estimating time, all sorts of things. Okay, so that's just a tiny snippet of what some of the symptoms could look like in your day-to-day life. Okay. Now we're going to talk through the neurobiology of ADHD, meaning like some of the ways in which our brain is different. So I want to speak specifically to 3 of the neurotransmitters that our brains have got less of. Okay. So they are dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. And I think it's really important that as adults with ADHD, we know this and we understand this, because there's actually we can see how this shows up in our life by having ADHD when we understand these things. But also there is a lot we can do to support the production of these neurotransmitters in our brain to help ourselves to increase these levels. And of course, if we're taking medication, they target usually one or more of these neurotransmitters and help to increase those levels for the period of time in which that medication is in our system. Okay, so starting from the top with dopamine. Now, this is one, if you've listened to the podcast, I talk about it all the time. Super passionate about this one. Okay, so dopamine, again, all of these are neurotransmitters, but they do multiple things in the brain. Okay, so It is like a chemical messenger, and it plays a big role in feelings of motivation, right? Motivating us to do things like maybe go and hang out the washing, or like, drive down to the shops to buy some more milk, right? Like motivating you to get out of bed, right? So dopamine plays a big role in feelings of motivation, as well as satisfaction, pleasure, and other brain functions. So specifically focus and attention. It contributes to those. Okay. Now, when we have less dopamine being produced in our brain, and when we've got lower levels of it, we may struggle with mundane tasks, with tasks we're not interested in, with things that are boring, right? With things we just don't want to do, right? That can be a real challenge for people with ADHD because we have less of this chemical in our brains, okay? Now, again, as I've said, there's a lot we can do naturally to increase this. And because we have less of it, I think it's also worth pointing out that we seek dopamine. Like we are more prone to dopamine seeking behaviors, which can lead to addiction. So dopamine seeking might look like binge eating food. That looked like that for me for a long time. Could look like drinking alcohol to, air quotes, take the edge off, but it becomes like a very habitual thing, which over time can become problematic. Dopamine seeking could also look like, running every single day because you need that hit, that high, those endorphins, which also gives you dopamine at the same time, right? Like you need that. So it can look like a variety of different things. It could be, video games or scrolling on your phone or like online shopping, all sorts of different things. Okay. So that's dopamine. Next, we've got norepinephrine, which, my friend, is a fancy ass way of saying adrenaline. Okay, so it's norepinephrine in the brain, but once it's released into the body, like into our system, then it's adrenaline. Okay, so this chemical is what helps us to stay awake, to pay attention, and to think clearly, right? It's like the alertness kind of chemical. It also plays a role in our body's fight or flight response. Okay, so it helps our body to kind of prepare to deal with a threat or like, need to run away, right? So it helps us with that. Then we've got serotonin. Now, serotonin is another one that I love because this neurotransmitter plays a very important role in our mood, our sleep, our cognition, so like how our brain's functioning, and our memory. I don't know about you, but mood, sleep, brain function, and memory are some things that sometimes I have difficulty with. Okay, so what that means is this can impact how we feel, how well we sleep, our ability to make decisions, what information we hold on to, or in many cases, what information we forget. Okay, so we have a little bit less serotonin in our system than our neurotypical friends. Okay, so of course, that is going to contribute to our ADHD symptoms and how severe they may be at times. Now, again, there's a lot we can do naturally to increase our serotonin, and some people even take an SSRI, which is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. So it's similar to an antidepressant in that it focuses on helping you to produce more of this good feeling chemical so that you improve your mood, right, and feel better, right? So there's lots of things there that we can do to help with serotonin. So let's talk about how our neurodevelopmental condition, that is ADHD, right, impacts our brain functions, shall we say, right? I'm trying not to say this too fancy, but it's a little fancy. Let me break it down. So if you've ever thought like, why does it take me 2 hours to write an email that other people can write in 10 minutes? I don't know about you, but like I've had that experience so many times, right? Or, I can't seem to get my ideas just to flow in this nice and orderly sequence and write down what I want to say, whereas other people seem to be able to do that no trouble, right? That, my friends, is what we call executive dysfunction, okay? So as ADHDers, we have challenges with our executive functions, and when they're not functioning, we call it dysfunction, executive dysfunction, okay? So executive functions are the specific self-directed actions that we use to control ourselves, okay? So if you think of it like it's like a GPS in our brain, okay, that's giving us step-by-step instructions to get to our destination. And when these specific executive functions, right, there are 6 of these people that need to work together, when they are not working together, we don't get the step-by-step instructions and we end up in the wrong place or going in circles, shall we say. All right, so these executive functions are really the secret to successful adulting. All right, so the 6 executive functions are inhibition, emotional regulation, self-awareness, working memory, self-motivation, planning, and problem solving. Okay, now, I don't have time to go into all of them here today, but I have got multiple podcast episodes on everything that I've already talked about, including executive functions, a beginner's guide to those, okay? But it's just kind of important to understand that this is one of the reasons why we may have difficulty doing things that require like multiple areas of our brain to come together, right? Like if you set a long-term goal, say you want to run a marathon, right? And you want to run the New York Marathon like in 2025. Man, that required something of my brain because I had to think, what year is it? What year am I about to say? Next year, right? Anyway, so let's say you've got this long-term goal to run the New York Marathon in next year, 2025. That means that you need to be thinking about like, how much training do I need to do? When do I need to do it? What about like hydration and nutrition and all of these things? When am I going to do that? How am I going to fit that in amongst my schedule? What happens if I miss a day? Do I need to do any stretching? There's all of these different things that you need to do. Then there's like, do I need to book a flight? Yes, I need to book a flight. When should I book the flight? Where will I stay? How long will I stay? Do I need to register? How much is that going to cost? Like there's all these different things that are required. You're going to need to, have self-motivation to train. You're going to need to plan things and solve some problems that are going to arise in this process. You're going to need to remember some things. You're going to need to have some self-awareness. You're going to need to regulate some emotions when you don't feel like running or you don't feel like, doing whatever you're meant to be doing that day, right? So again, this is where we can experience a lot of different challenges when these kind of GPS managers in our brain are not working together, right? I hope I explained that all right without making it too complicated. So next I want to talk a little bit about some of the common myths and misinformation that you may have heard or you may hear about ADHD because there is a lot out there. So some of the common ones are, first of all, it only affects children. Right. Well, if you're listening to this, then you're an adult with ADHD. So we can just say, well, that's bullshit, isn't it? Yeah. For a long time, yes, it was thought of to have been just children. I think it was in the 70s or maybe it was even later than that. I can't remember. There is a date. Anyway, when they were like, oh, no, it definitely, is in adults as well. Right. So we won't go into that, but no, it's not just children. It does impact adults. Do some children grow out of it is a question I often get when I'm giving a talk in a community talk to raise awareness. And I would say to that, like, yes, I have heard of instances of children who did air quotes grow out of it, but it's more so that if we can find a child with ADHD early on and we can offer them support and it may be medication, etc., we can help them to work with their brain. They can then create the systems and structures in their lives and have the adequate support to be able to thrive to the point where it may look like they've grown out of it because they have adapted themselves, their brain, their life to having ADHD and no longer require, medication or external support that's obvious to others. So do we grow out of it? No, we don't. We've always got ADHD. But if it's addressed early on, then yes, you can have adequate support to which it may be invisible to somebody else that we have it, right? All right, the next one is some people are going to say, ADHD is just an excuse for laziness, right? People with ADHD are just lazy or they lack willpower or they just need to try harder. Like that's some bullshit. And that's a lot of the messages that we have heard. That is not true. Okay. We have less dopamine in our brain. And as I explained, dopamine plays a big role in motivation. Okay. So if it's something we're interested in, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, we have no trouble doing something we're really interested in and passionate about. But when it comes to mundane, mundane and boring, I was trying to like merge those two words, but when it comes to mundane tasks, boring tasks, things we don't want to do or things that are hard for us, that can be very difficult because we don't have this huge kind of reserve of dopamine, this chemical that we need to get us to do those things. Okay, so it's not true. We're not lazy. We don't lack willpower, right? And we don't just need to try harder. We actually need to work with our brain, right? I'm massive on that. The next myth you might hear is that ADHD is actually caused by bad parenting. No, my friends, again, complete bullshit. It is hereditary. In the majority of cases, it runs in families, okay? So it can skip a generation and it may not impact, if you've got 5 kids, it might get 3 out of 5, right? Like it's not going to get everybody, but I don't know that I wanted to say that way. Like it's going to get you. Like it's not a bad thing, okay? That's not what I mean. But it is hereditary is what I'm saying, okay? In the majority of cases, it runs in families. It's definitely not caused by bad parenting. Now, the last one I want to address, a common myth or misconception. I'm on a roll. I'm trying to talk super fast to get it all in because I've got lots I want to say. I just need to slow down. The last misconception that I'm going to address is medication is a cure. No. Don't get me wrong, medication can be hugely beneficial for people with ADHD, and I'm a huge fan. I take medication and I'm a big fan. I'm also a huge fan of doing what you can for yourself naturally because there's so much we can do to help increase our brain chemicals and also work with our brains to thrive. But medication isn't a cure. Like you're not going to pop this pill and then magically be neurotypical, magically not have ADHD, right? It doesn't quite work that way. Okay, so I just want you to know that if that's something you're thinking, because I was thinking that. I was like, woo, I'm going to take this pill and like everything's going to be sweet, and not quite. Okay. All right. So I want to also highlight some of the positive traits that can come with ADHD, because while there is often a very large focus on the difficulties that one can experience with ADHD, there are also so many positive things that come with having ADHD, right? For example, we make incredible entrepreneurs, right? So many of the entrepreneurs and the successful, people who've gone out and done crazy, wild, different, new, incredible things have ADHD and other forms of neurodiversity, all right? So some of the positive traits include resilience, being incredibly generous and very empathetic, thinking outside the box. I love that one. I just friggin' love it. Like we think differently and I love that. Hyperfocus. It's a very handy thing to have, right? We have a strong sense of fairness and justice, right? I know I have that. Also a willingness to take risks, spontaneity, creativity. I think we have incredible creativity. We've generally got a pretty good sense of humor. Yeah, we do. And we can be incredibly energetic, especially when we're in the environments and with the people that we like to be with. Now, there are some well-known and successful people who have ADHD, including Simone Biles, who has won, many medals in the Olympics for gymnastics. So Simone Biles, Sir Richard Branson. He also has dyslexia. He has started over 40 companies, and the most recent one is something to do with dyslexia. I'm not too sure what, but I know it was supporting people with dyslexia. Mel Robbins, if you are familiar with her podcast, she's got an amazing podcast. She's got ADHD. Stephen Bartlett, so he is the Diary of a CEO. Again, he's got a podcast, a YouTube channel, and he does a lot of amazing things. Whoopi Goldberg. So she's an actress, in case you didn't know. Michael Jordan, of course, our basketball fame. And Jennifer Lawrence. So Jennifer Lawrence is an actress. She's one of my favorites, just because every time I see a clip of her outside of her acting, like when she's being interviewed, I'm just like, oh my God, she's so ADHD and so like me. Like she says funny things and makes funny faces, and I'm like, oh my God, I love you. So she was in like the Hunger Games and lots of other things, but that's just what's coming to mind right now. So those are some of the peoples, some of them. Now, another important thing to know when you are navigating this ADHD journey is that we are wired for interest, okay? So having ADHD means that we have an interest-based nervous system. Okay, this means we've got no trouble doing things that we are interested in or passionate about. You may have trouble stopping doing them. Okay, so because of this, we prioritize out of interest over importance or urgency. Right? That is a key distinction between our neurotypical friends and us. We prioritize out of interest, whereas they will usually prioritize out of what's most important or most urgent. Okay? We seek high stimulation, strong incentives, more immediate rewards, okay? Because these produce dopamine in our brain, right? They help us to maintain and create more motivation and momentum. So having an interest-based nervous system, it's not a damaged or a defective nervous system, okay? It's actually a nervous system that works incredibly well. It just has a set of rules that's different. That's all. And this nervous system that we have, this interest-based nervous system, right? It's also why we're able to tackle problems and, solve things and see solutions or ideas that other people can't. So it is a beautiful thing to have, my friends. Again, I have a lot of episodes that address this and how you can use this and work with this to really help yourself when it comes to getting your brain on board with tasks that you may be struggling to address and get to. So, as this is a beginner's guide to ADHD, I'm going to give you 4 steps that I recommend to help you not only manage but ultimately get to the place where you are thriving with your ADHD. Okay? So, the first one, number 1, is to get support. It is so much easier to do this with other people who get it, with professionals who know how to help you maximize your brain. So, ADHD coaching or therapy, right? Working with someone who has a deep knowledge and understanding of how our ADHD brains work, and then can help you to create the scaffolding that you need where you need it for thriving. Okay? So again, getting support. Number 2 is finding community. So being amongst other people just like you who get it, who are, experiencing similar things, have struggled with similar things, can relate to you, can share ideas, can, be with you where you're at and help you to navigate it all. It is incredible just to feel seen. Like I remember, I think I was following somebody on Instagram and they talked about how they had just learned that it was common for people with neurodiversity, so people with ADHD, to struggle with certain sounds such as people chewing. And I was like, oh my God. I remember being a teenager and I couldn't be in the same room as my dad when he was eating dinner because he would chew so loudly and I just wanted to punch him in the face. It grated on me so bad. It was just impossible. And she went on to explain why this was and all of this. And I was like, oh my God, I feel so seen. I feel so understood. It makes so much sense. And I was like, thank you. Right? So again, being in community, Facebook groups, there are so many free groups you can be in, right? Whether you can get into a community or groups that meet in person, that's fantastic. But there are so many online, even following Instagram accounts. So if you're not yet following us, navigating.adult.adhd, I share loads of stuff. Then there's TikTok videos, YouTube, all sorts of things. Okay. There is a very well-known quote, which I love, and it's, there is comfort in knowing you are a normal zebra, not a strange horse. It's hard to find community with other zebras if you don't know you belong. And it's impossible for a zebra to be happy or healthy spending its life feeling like a failed horse. And I think that speaks beautifully to the importance of having community. If you're here in New Zealand, I know that the ADHD New Zealand organisation, they've got a free Facebook group with loads of people that you can join, which is fantastic. And they've got other resources as well on their website. Number 3 is if you are doing the medication route, okay, and I appreciate that that's not for everybody and sometimes it's not available. If you are choosing to go down the medication route, allow time to get it right. If you don't think that the first one is the best one or you're questioning it, ask the questions, try different things, be willing to get it right. Okay. So it can take, I say, allow a good year. Allow 12 months to get your medication right. It took me just over 12 months, I think, to finally find one. It was the third one that I tried that has felt like the right thing for me in my body. Okay. During this time in this process, I highly recommend that you track things. Pay attention to your mood, to your energy levels, to how you sleep, how it affects your sleep, to your body, how your body feels, to your irritability, to when it wears off, what do you notice? When it kicks in, what do you notice, right? Track these things over time because that information is going to help you to find the best dose, the best medication for you. Now, if you have a cycle, so if you're a female who has a hormonal cycle, track that as well because your hormones are going to hugely impact your ADHD medication, also your dopamine levels, all sorts of things. Okay, so again, track your cycle because that will help you to see patterns. And for some women, we do decide to change our medication or up our dosage for a certain time of the month when we have difficulties because our current medication may not work as well. Okay. I get a lot of questions about that, so I could, do a whole podcast, and we do have some here, but again, that's just some really useful information. Now, number 4, so the fourth thing that I recommend, and I know this one can be hard to put a focus here because these are some things that we can struggle with that come with ADHD. However, put a focus on getting enough sleep, getting good nutrition, getting regular physical activity of any kind of activity that you enjoy, and put a focus on doing things you enjoy. Okay? So again, put a focus on sleep, nutrition, physical activity, and joy. These things help hugely with ADHD. Okay? No doubt you have experienced a time where you had either a really shit sleep or let's say you got drunk and the next day was a total write-off, right? When we don't get good sleep and we're trying to function on, say, 3 hours, we don't function very well. Everything is slow, we're more irritable, life is way more difficult, right? When we're not getting adequate sleep, nutrition, exercise, and joy in our lives, we then can increase the intensity of our ADHD symptoms, right? It can make our ADHD symptoms kind of fired up and worse and harder to manage, right? It makes our day-to-day even harder. So hence the kind of encouragement to put a real focus there and in doing those. Now, when I speak to joy, this is something I talk about a lot with my clients, is don't wait to do things you enjoy, because doing things you enjoy, right? If you enjoy going to a cafe and having coffee with friends or people watching, or, walking along the beach, or, for me, I love to go and cuddle my cats or go for a walk and feed the ducks, right? Things that you enjoy help you to increase those brain chemicals that we have less of, specifically the serotonin and the dopamine. So it's really good for your brain. It also supports emotional regulation, right? And kind of de-stressing, unwinding, helping you process emotions. So there are so many benefits that come with doing things you enjoy, just those simple kind of things. So please don't avoid them. In fact, here is your prescription to go and do them more. All right, my friend. Now, I would be doing you a disservice if I did not invite you to join ADHD Home right now, because this is for you, for the ADHDer who is newly diagnosed, trying to figure it all out and trying to make sense of everything. ADHD Home is the support, the knowledge, the understanding, and the tools that I wish I had had when I was first diagnosed. Okay? Everything you need to help you thrive with ADHD in one place. You've got ADHD coaching, expert knowledge and support from me. You've got connection and community amongst other adults with ADHD who are just like you. You have a safe and supportive place to ask questions, to share your struggles and get support. Plus, you have a huge library. There are over 60 videos with more being added all the time, right? Pre-recorded videos to help you understand and work with your brain, as well as regular workshops on ADHD related topics. So it's a monthly membership where you can stay as long as you like or as little as you like. You can literally graduate yourself anytime without hoops to jump through. It is very ADHD focused and friendly, all right? Literally created by an ADHDer. Hi, that's me. For ADHDers. That's you, my friend. So you can visit adhdhome.co.nz to check it out, and I would love to coach and support you. Welcome to Team ADHD. I am so happy that you are here with us, okay? Lastly, I just want to say, I promise it gets easier and your life gets better and better when you start to work with your ADHD. If you have questions about ADHD or about ADHD Home, you can email me or you can reach out via social media. This is just the beginning. Huge love, my friend. I'll speak to you soon. Hey, ADHDer. I know just how hard it can be when it feels like your ADHD is really holding you back. You're frustrated, overwhelmed, and not sure where to even start. That is exactly why I created ADHD Home. ADHD Home is a monthly membership, and it is what I wish I had had when I was diagnosed later in life. When I was struggling and just desperate to feel better, searching for a way that I could finally live up to my potential. Now I'm giving you the tools and the coaching that have changed my life, with over 60 videos to help you navigate and thrive with ADHD. Plus, you get group coaching calls with me, regular ADHD workshops on topics like RSD, dopamine, and emotional regulation. And you've got a community of other adults with ADHD who have got your back. It's time to make ADHD work for you. Visit adhdhome.com and join us today. I can't wait to coach and support you. Let's go, my friend.